Welcome back to Season 2 of another take on personal leadership. You're with your host, Nick Phillips, and I've got Tim Marsh across from me. How are you, Tim?
Fantastic, Nick.
That's good. Ready to go for Season 2.
I am.
And we've got a really good first topic. We're going to talk about the concept of high return activities.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say high return activities, what does that mean?
So if you think about where your time and effort and energy goes in a day, and the result of using that time, effort and energy, it's looking at it from a perspective of what gets the best return or impact from that use. So ultimately, we only have 24 hours in a day, we only have so much energy, and it's another way of looking at how do I get better outcomes and decisions that I make about where I put that time, effort and energy. So we're going to talk about high return activities as not as specific actions, but a broader set of headings, and we'll explain further, but a broader set of headings of where you're putting your time, effort and energy in a day to get the best outcome.
So this is something that so I'm thinking about it from the context of someone's role.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, in their position. They've got a series of particular outcomes or targets they're looking at hitting, and sitting behind that is actually the actions that are required to meet those. Is that where this sort of can be looked at as a template, I guess, or a framework you could use with, a line manager about where are my areas of priority or high return areas or actions?
Yeah, I think it might almost be in between. So ultimately, people in a work situation have outcomes that they have to get, targets that they need to hit, KPIs that they're measured on. Underneath those are things that when they do them often and on an ongoing basis, they're more likely to hit the KPIs, to meet the targets or to get those outcomes. And within those things could be a whole series of detailed sets of actions. So let's use a really good example, and it's an easy one that comes to mind. When we talk about sales, so someone who's in a sales role ultimately is probably going to have a target or some kind of outcome in mind about the amount of sales or the yearly or quarterly targets that they're working towards. They, on a daily basis and a weekly basis and a monthly basis, need to make decisions about where their time and effort and energy goes. So do I pick up the phone and do I make calls to get an appointment? Should I be in appointments? Should I be doing follow-ups? Where does my account management fit? All of these headings, but within each of those, even in appointment making, there could be, this is the detail that's not in high return activities, it's contained within the heading, is things like doing my research on the person that I'm about to call, checking my notes or the system that we're using about previous history with this person. They've got all these little subtasks. But for a salesperson, their high return activities are likely to be making appointments, actually being in appointments, follow-ups from appointments, account management kind of practices, referral, those kind of elements. And at the end of the day, high return activities, rule of thumb roughly, shouldn't be any more than 5 or 6. If you start having too many more, then you've got just a list of actions.
Yeah, you might be too in the detail.
Yes. So
high level.
Yeah, and what it allows you to do is look across a week and be able to go, is more of my time going into the things that are ultimately going to lead me to the targets or the outcomes that I need to do, or am I missing some of those things and need to make decisions on that? Because it's easy to get sucked into doing stuff that we like doing the stuff that is screaming out louder than anything else, or steering away from the things that we don't like doing. There's other kind of elements in there, but the general principle behind high return activities is, am I putting my time, effort and energy in the right things, rather than you get to the end of a month or a quarter or a year and you go, I'm miles off where I should be. And it's the accumulated effect of being aware of what they are, and then part of this piece for today is about checking in along the way so that you don't have those surprises.
So we started to touch on it a little bit, but I want to talk about what is kind of the best practice use of this framework concept, but also how can we get started if this is completely new to us? Mm-hmm. What's the first step that we can sort of take? Maybe start with, what's that best practice look like? How do we teach, in our training, our leadership development to leaders and teams? How do we teach this concept? How is it actually practically used?
really good point with this is if it's a team leader, for example, who wants to start with this, or the manager of the team leader, they themselves should be practicing it first. There's no use asking people around you to do it if you're not practicing it, because it's about modelling it, it's about reinforcing how it works. And we're not talking about a concept that's just a trendy set of words and you throw it out there and maybe someone will pick it up, or hopefully everyone else does it but I don't have to do it, kind of thing. So it's an opportunity for everyone, and really we're talking about the best of the best practice in its simplest form is being able to have conversations with people around you in a number of ways about cross-checking am I on the same page as you? Are these actually the right things, and are we actually doing what we should be doing? Like if you put it in its simplest form, it is more a conversational piece, but it's also a planning piece for the individual. So whether whatever system you're using for planning, and for example for me, and that I'm very visual, the colour coding of elements of my week allows me to have a quick cast over it at the beginning of the week, or 2 weeks before, or a month before, to be able to go, is my time, effort and energy going to be going on the things that are making the most difference based on those colour codes? So like yellow has an importance to me, and I need to see around about at least a day of that a week. It could be spread across the week, but it needs to be in there. So in a visual sense, I can straight away see in the following weeks where there isn't enough yellow, and yellow has a meaning in terms of meeting with prospects and or previous clients. So if that's down, I am then making effort in advance to make sure that I don't have those months where you go, I've just missed stuff completely and I'm now a month behind where I should be. So we all have, there's days that won't go to plan, etc. But this is about a view across my time, effort and energy on things in the same way. This applies for away from work, and we'll cover that as well. But it's an opportunity to go, do I really know what is going to make the most difference? And am I doing it? And if I am doing it, how do I keep repeating it? And if I'm not doing it, what changes do I need to make? That's in its best practice kind of piece. Those fundamentals underpin whatever you do. So if you're the line manager and you're trying to introduce it to your team, and you're actually starting to have conversations about, here's where my time, effort and energy should be going in a week. Here's the things that are getting in my way that I'm starting to work on, which might be delegating work to other people so that it doesn't happen, changing a system so that it doesn't happen as much, or actually changing my own habits. Then I'm now in a position where I'm not only aware, but I'm starting to plan for what I do with that, and then continuing to check in along the way. And that early on, it might be once a week, you're just having a quick look over your past week to see where your time, effort and energy went, and then over your oncoming week. And it's not meant to be this complex part. For some people, it will seem a little bit complex in the beginning because they're not used to having this way of defining where all of the actions and tasks that they do in a week, what sort of headings that they fit under.
I like what you're saying about how it doesn't need to be complex, and in fact it can sort of fit into whatever your routine already is around planning or the documentation of what you do in a week. And that might be for some people just a task list. The example we're talking about here is planning your week on your calendar and color coding it. If that's not something that's already done, that's not necessarily, you don't say this must be the way you run it. It's got to fit in with how your weeks are mapped out and planned for you.
Yes.
But using it in the way that it can guide decision making around where you put your time, effort and energy. And even in the task list, if you've got your 5 or 6 that you've defined, just numbering them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you've got your task list sitting there and putting, okay, this one is to do with 1, this one's to do with 3. Even that's a visual of you're now making more informed decisions.
Yes.
About where you're spending your time, and that's going to, over the long run, if you're looking at weeks into months into quarters, that's going to add up and make a big difference. Because the next step, of course, is applying within those 5 or 6. It's going, how much should in a week I be spending in each area as well, of course.
Yeah, the next logical piece on that is if you could actually list what the top 5 or 6 are that you think they are and had a percentage of time in a week, Of course, it's not going to add up to 100% of the time because there's always other things. So I just want to be really cautious about this. And I know we all get caught up in that where we go, okay, I've just added it all up and we're at 110%. We haven't taken into account anything else.
Guilty of that.
But the conversation to be had with the line managers, particularly if there's an opportunity to check your understanding, because these are the conversations that aren't being had, is number one, the conversation with yourself to be clear on what you think it is. And then number two, does my line manager agree with it?
That's the key, yeah.
And, my previous experiences with this concept have always been, and I mean always, that when those conversations are had, there's normally some changes. And that's okay. Because if you think, okay, this is my number one and I should be spending 10% of time on it, let's say it's planning. Number two is, leading my team, which includes all the bits with that, and that should be 30%, et cetera, et cetera. And then I go sit in front of my line manager and my line manager says, tell me what's in that number two. And you start talking about it and they go, I think that should be number one. Subtle, but significant. Because the more you're on the same page as your line manager or the business owner or whoever it is, the less likely you are to run into those situations down the track where you're having more difficult conversations about why wasn't this done or why has this issue occurred. So I guess it's another best practice piece, if you want to call it that, about once you have an idea about what you think it is, who are some of the stakeholders that you might need to check it with and check for understanding. And I really want to stress this, that it continues to change. So once you've done it once, it isn't like I'll come back 12 months time and I'll check in again. I don't think anyone is in a situation where they could say, even over 6 months, pick 3 months, that there isn't some kind of change where things are moving out of order. You take end of financial year normally triggers some changes in priorities of things. Leading into Christmas time, manufacturing world, etc. There's things that will start to shift and change, and the scenario you don't want to be in is where you're thinking the stuff that you're working on is going to make the most impact when the business or your boss or somebody critical around you is actually not on the same page as you. Because that's when you're going to run into conflict, problems and issues. Some of this is a conversation starter to ensure that there isn't too many surprises, and it also has the benefit of sometimes the really important part is being able to go, if something comes from right field, where does it now fit? And rather than just add it onto my task list and I'll do more and more and more, which certainly for newer leaders who are trying to impress, as an example, will simply just add it on their list, which then means something's going to give somewhere else. It's not about how can we stuff more things into a day. So there's some really good material out challenging the notion of time management. There's one called 4,000 Weeks that I'm currently reading. It stresses this as well, as this is not about how do I do more and fit more into my day. It's the simple question of what really is important, and am I putting the time, effort and energy into the things that will contribute to look if we flip it and say home, let's look in the home setting.
Let's do it.
Where should my time, effort and energy be used at home?
Yeah.
Where does it make the most difference? My suggestion is there's normally should be, and for some people it's a challenge, where's the time for themselves and their health and their mental health?
Absolutely.
Where's the time for them and their partner, with their kids, with other stuff that's meaningful to them? And the irony of we're talking about a concept that at work people will probably find a little bit easier to apply. It has even more value away from work.
Yeah, especially in the self-care sort of piece.
Oh, no, I just think how many people come to work on a Monday and they go, I don't know where the weekend went.
Yeah, exactly right. And we've actually, I think it was our first ever episode of the ATOPL series last year. We did an episode on self-care. So worth listening to that one too. Any other tips for the away from work setting up of this?
Well, same concept. As an individual, if you go, okay, this is what I think the high return activities are, who's the stakeholders here? It could be your partner, could be cross-checking on that. And we're not into marriage counselling or that side of things, but the concept of relationships, there are points of conflict at work and at home is around where people make choices about their time, effort and energy. So the partner who's off doing lots of things that don't connect with the other person's things. It doesn't mean they have to all align, but what a great way to have a conversation about, if the kids are important in people's lives, when this weekend are we going to spend some quality time with the kids? And it might be 2 hours.
Yeah,
I'm not talking block out the whole weekend, but the conversation starter is off the basis of what is important. And then what does that look like in terms of where our time, effort and energy is going to go?
No, excellent. All right, so to wrap it up, as we always do every episode, 7-day commitment for our viewers and listeners on high return activities. What is a single action that we can set for ourselves in the next 7 days?
I think there'll be some people who already have a notion of this, and you don't have to call it high return activities. You could give whatever context you want, but simply leading into whatever days are left in the week. If someone's listening in and it's a Friday, is to have a look at their calendar or whatever process they're using and be able to go, is there any information here that tells me about where my time, effort and energy is going? I think that's sort of part A. If there's nothing, that's okay. That might be the trigger for part B, which is what could I do that I might want to map some of this with. But if you've already got it, then it's having a go at listing what are your top 5 high return activities and just having a shot at it. It's a fantastic starting point.
Excellent. All right. That about wraps it up. Thanks, Tim. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.